I'm Andrea Lee Matthews, writer, photographer, and clairvoyant medium, and this is the Bold, Brave Woman Project. This podcast is a living, breathing unfolding of what it really means to step into our becoming. Born from the ashes of a failed YouTube channel, this weekly podcast brings you real, unfiltered moments of failure, of bravery, and of deep intuitive knowing so that you too can step into who you're becoming with even more trust and bravery. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of the Bold, Brave Woman Project. This is a really interesting episode this week, because this week I want to talk about making a move even before you're ready. And the reason why the timing of this episode and this conversation is so relevant right now is because it's been a few weeks now since this big unraveling, this big upheaval, this tipping out and trying to work through this new identity, this new chapter that I'm stepping into. And there have been so many moments over the last couple of months where I've just wanted to retreat from it all, where I have just wanted to shut down, retreat, mainly because I've not known what action to take or what move to make. And I've had to just sit with that and then find reasons why I need to make moves anyway, why I need to continue to find my voice, find my passion, find my path, and just keep taking steps forward. Because sometimes when we're in that space of not knowing who we are, not knowing what we want to do next, it's so easy to retreat. It's so easy to just fall into that energy of, well, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I want to do next. So I'm just going to hide. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to wait until everything feels perfectly clear before I put myself out there, or before I really take the action, or take any kind of action, make any kind of move, because it's all just too hard. It's too scary. It's too much. And I've had so many moments over the last couple of weeks where I've felt that. And even today, sitting down to record this episode, I was like, what am I going to say? I don't have it figured out just yet. So what am I going to say? What's the point of even recording an episode? I have nothing of value to share this week. And I had to just sit with that for a moment and be like, no, I'm just going to take action anyway. I know I can connect into the moment, and even just talking about this feeling of I don't exactly know what to say or what move to make, but I'm going to make one anyway, because every time we take a step in the direction of a dream, any dream, we take that inspired action, we put ourselves out there, it starts to catalyze change and manifestation and movement in our life, in our world, that starts to really move us into a direction of self-discovery, a direction that we then get to look at. We get to zoom out for a moment and look at and be like, okay, I took that action and it revealed this. It revealed this thing about myself, or it revealed this desire that's starting to percolate here, this dream, this desire, this feeling, or I took an inspired action, or I had a conversation, or I recorded this episode and talked about this thing, and I'm realizing actually that's not for me, or that is not the direction that I want to head in. And that is all beautiful feedback as well. It's perfect. It's starting to build that tapestry of understanding that we have around ourselves, and also around what we want to create and what we want to have for our lives. And one of the things that's been becoming really apparent over the last couple of months is that creativity and expression is becoming so important in my life and in my identity. Over the last 4 years, since stepping out of the corporate world into this coaching arena, it has been very focused on what is it that I can teach? What is it that I can mentor or share in, with a very strong kind of entrepreneurial or corporate perspective. There wasn't a lot of space for pure creative flow. And that was because I'd made a decision a while ago that creativity lives in its own camp. It's like in a separate box. I had a really interesting experience in relationship with creativity, which I think I've touched on in a few episodes briefly, and I'm sure will come up many times over the course of sharing all these different stories about my life with you. But when I was a child, I was very creative, and I had a beautiful relationship with my grandmother who, she taught me a lot of creative principles, but at the same time, there was a lot of critique around it. You know, you didn't do this right, or you could have done that better, or, you know, you'll never be an artist if you don't approach it in this way, or that's sloppy work. Like, there was a lot of critique around these joyous moments of let's go and paint, or let's go create, let's go collage. We did a lot of creative things together, but at the end of that activity, there was a lot of critique. And so over the years, I'd kind of popped creativity, expression, artistry into this separate box that was like, let's not touch that unless we can get it right. You know, unless we can get it perfect, we can nail it, we've got mastery and skill and artistry at the highest level. Let's kind of keep that off to the side. And I progressed into very strategic, logical-based careers and worked in that for a long time, that when I started my coaching business after having a major health breakdown and having my hysterectomy, which I've touched on a couple of times, it wasn't until that moment that I started this reflection process of what is it that I really want. That was like 4 years ago now, of really wanting to step into more and more of who I was. And so 4 years ago, during that recovery, I decided to step out of being employed as a full-time corporate strategist, as someone that was climbing the corporate ladder to get up to that CEO, highly respected, highly regarded, very intelligent type in the corporate world, to sidestep into my own coaching business, which was beautiful because I could start to bring in some more of the feminine energy, the more of the being in service of coaching and working particularly with women to really help step them into their bravery, into their voice, all these different niches that I started coaching in over the last 4 years. But creativity was still in a separate bucket. It was still this untouchable thing. And it wasn't until recently, with this big moment of realizing even though I've made so many changes of stepping out of the corporate world and starting my own business, I'd still managed to walk myself into a specific box that had rules around it. And I was still only making solid moves when I knew that there was safety around that, or I knew what the move was. And I've been looking a lot at my Instagram feeds, my Threads feeds, really thinking about how I've been showing up in these spaces, particularly publicly, and looking at what I want to start really stepping into and even talking about here on the podcast with you. I was looking at it and thinking, oh my goodness, these posts that I've been putting out, this presence that I've had, particularly on my Instagram feed at andy.matthews, it's still this element of needing to show up in a certain way. I haven't really given myself permission all this time, even though I've been running Instagram now for 4 years, and let's be honest, not well. And that's part of what we're talking about today. Even although I've been showing up over the last 4 years, and most consistently since I went to Spain in September about 2 years ago, that trip really solidified this need to, okay, I'm going to start really taking Instagram seriously. I'm going to show up. I'm going to, do behind the scenes stuff and figure out, trending audios and popular reels and all that sort of stuff. Start showing up more consistently. There is still this element of hiding behind performance that is starting to reveal itself, especially when I've reflected over the last week or so over what is it that my heart is really calling to, what is it that I want to set and create for myself and for my life based on desire rather than based on what I felt like I needed to do from a corporate world perspective or an entrepreneur perspective, or even just to almost feel like I have permission to be on Instagram and show up on social media. And so much of it is in this energy of performance. And sometimes that can be really hard, not only to see, but also to admit, both to yourself and even publicly or outwardly. But when we are able to take that moment and just have a look at it and realize, then we can actually do something with it. And so there's been so much that's kind of coming together over the last couple of weeks that I'm starting to see to be able to make a change and do something different. And so this desire to do something purely creative, this energy, this need to just express, but not from a let's be creative and show up on social media and perform, letting that fall away to just really uncover that there is this undercurrent of creative energy, of expression that just wants to flow out into the world to create something different, to express in a way that pulls together all of these different fragments of me. This is what's really, really important. Because what I'm realizing is that for such a long time, I've tried to put myself into specific categories of identity or specific boxes to try and feel whole. You know, we find a box and then we label it and we put ourselves into it and we pour all of the pieces of ourselves into this box, mainly to try and feel safe. Because when we can label it, when we can identify it, and when the world can also identify with it, it feels safe. It's like I'm safe within this title of this box of entrepreneur, of whatever it is. And there's a million different labels and boxes that we could name here, but we find the safest box that fits the phase of life that we're in right now. We pour all of ourselves in it, and then we act accordingly from that space. But what happens when we start dissolving all of those boxes is that we can feel, and we've talked about it a little bit here, that space of the void, that space of the unknown. It's like no longer is there a box for the world, myself, my family, for anyone to be able to identify me by. So now I'm awash, and now I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to hide until I figure it out. I'm going to retreat, I'm going to retract, I'm going to pull back in myself, I'm going to hide, and if I do happen to show up, I'm going to do it in that performative or perfectionist type energy because it's safer and the world can understand it. So therefore, it's just easier for me to navigate the world in a way that others can place me. And I guess this happens in all phases, in all areas of life. If I reflect back to, my primary school and secondary school years, and I can see how I tried to pour myself into boxes back then, that different peer groups or parents or teachers or people outside of school and within my life could easily label me and say, "Oh, Andrea is this, or Andrea is that, or she's a good girl, or she's this or that." So many different labels, so many different boxes. And even through my corporate life up until recently, putting myself into the I'm a strategist, or I'm a coach, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. And then recently deciding to dismantle all of those boxes and strip it all back to understand what is here. It's like, well, how am I meant to put myself out in the world if I don't understand what box I'm in? Because it makes it really hard to put together a Instagram reel if I don't know the label or the box that I'm in. And so I just kind of withdrew and hid and contracted all the way back and went, oh, well, I'll just reshare some stuff, or I'll just remix some reels, or I'll just put out inspirational quotes. And of course, those things are beautiful, and I make sure there's a beautiful message for people behind those things, but they're still done from an energy of, well, I don't feel safe. I don't know how to label myself. So I'm just going to put that out there with the energy of service, but from this pulled back, reserved perspective. And you might feel yourself doing that in certain parts of your life as well. It's like, well, I'm a little bit unsure. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what box I'm in, or I'm in a particular box and I don't like it and I'm waiting to get out of it. So I'm just going to present in this way because it's safe and it's still acceptable and it's still in a beautiful energy of service. But you can feel that withdrawal. You can feel, it feels sticky. I don't know about you, but when I turn up to post on Instagram at the moment, there's still this like ickiness, this stickiness of like, oh, I know I need to put something out, to please the algorithm, to make sure I'm still relevant, but also because I want to be of service to people and I want to, share these thoughts that are coming through, but I'm going to do it with this kind of easy to apply, quick, just get it up there kind of energy. Or, you pour hours and hours and hours and hours into one reel because you're unsure and you want to get it perfect and you need to play it safe. There's still that energy that's incongruent with this beautiful, powerful essence that resides within us that doesn't really want to hide, wants to be out in the world, but we're kind of trying to play it safe before we put it out there. And this is where we need to, and I'm of course saying this to myself every single day, and even in this moment, it's like we need to take the inspired action in the direction that we want to go, in that sacral fire, desire that is starting to awaken in us, even if we're not used to kind of feeling desire, if we're used to just playing it safe and following the definitions or the rules of the life that's been set out for us. It's like really coming back to just finding that tiny little flicker of flame, or if you're used to really being in touch with your desire and what you want and who you are and your sacral fire, like stepping into that burning flame and being like, I'm going to show up with an inspired action, knowing that inspired action will lead to more and more and more clarity. And I don't need to wait to have a defined box before I put myself out there. What I have to say right here, right now, is just as powerful and it's just as potent as it is now, without having to be for something particular or to fit a certain stereotype or a certain safe kind of construct that I need to have before I'm going to put myself out there. It's like, no, decide that it's safe enough just to step up to that altar, that microphone, that social media, creative project, that conversation, that email, that request. I'm just going to show up in the energy of knowing that I am safe no matter what my definition is, no matter whether I'm in a box, outside of a box, breaking down the box, I'm safe. And I'm going to take that inspired action to get me into movement, to move towards the dream that I'm having, particularly harnessing that creative force that exists within and around you that you can tap into. Because what I'm really discovering in this process is that all of those times that I popped myself into a strategic thinking brain, logical type construct, and I either popped creativity to the side, or I made it something that was outside of me, or sometimes I even remember thinking, oh, that's a luxury. Like, I don't have time to be creative. I need to make money, or I need to do this thing that is going to drive to this particular outcome. I'll get to creative when I have time, or for purposes that drive towards those goals. So it's like, oh, I'll make my branding pretty, or I'll allow the creative energy in because it's going to drive me towards these safe box-like constructs. And the creative energy is still kind of on the outside, or it's still kind of like a tool rather than a way of being. And here's the most interesting thing that I'm discovering, that I've always had this deep yearning, this deep knowing that creativity was important, that I loved it. I think back to when I was a child and just how many hours I spent being creative before I let that complex critique narrative take over and change the definition or change the feeling around creative energy. This desire to be creative has always been there. And it's taken this moment of really unpacking who it is that I am and what it is that I want to move into. And even although I don't have a lot of that defined, this desire to allow creative energy to move through me in unique, different, interesting ways that it hasn't moved previously. Perhaps, back when I was a child, it was painting, it was collaging, it was very hand on canvas or hand on paper type art. And I had those mediums as the definition of creativity for such a long time. But what I'm realizing is that creative energy is like life force. It's like flow. It's very similar to if you are a channeler or if you're used to receiving messages and energy from the ether. It's that type of feeling where you exist in your own body, in your own form, but there's this feeling, there's this flow, there's this sparkle, this energy that kind of exists around you. And you feel it wanting to come through you and land in some sort of a medium, whether that's on the paper, whether that's through music, whether that's through speaking in a podcast or on stages. There's so many infinite amounts of creative pursuits, acting. Gosh, we could list them for days, but I won't. But you feel this buzz, this electricity, this energy that just kind of like exists and floats in the ether just outside of you, that is wanting to land somewhere. And you feel it. And you might have those moments where you allow yourself to just, dabble with it. You just grab it for a few minutes and be like, oh, that's fun, that's creative. And sometimes the logical mind, this is what my mind used to do, it would be like, oh no, I don't have time for that. Got to go do this important, serious, logical, structural based thing based on the box and the life that I have, and also time and a whole bunch of other constructs that we have around us. So I'll come back to that. Or we might have moments, and I've had this as well, where the creative energy comes in and we're like, yes, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to write this thing, and we allow it to kind of pour in and pour through. But then based on the identity or the construct that we're in at the time, we're like, well, I don't know what to do with this, or this is different, it's outside what I'm doing, now I'm confused, am I meant to be doing this thing over here that's flowing through me, or, should I go back to the sure thing or the thing the industry experts say? And we end up in this really confused space. And I'm only saying this because this is definitely something that I've lived, that I'm like, oh, well, now it's just another idea. Now I don't know what to do. Now I'm overwhelmed. It doesn't make sense. I can't get the logical construct to really wrap around this, so I'm just going to park it. Or I'm just going to be like, I can turn it inwards sometimes and be like, well, I'm just having too many ideas. I'm just someone that has too many ideas and doesn't action any of them. So I retreat. I park it, I retreat, and go back into either the hiding state or the usual kind of normal life state, sometimes robotic state of going through the motions. And that creative energy or those creative ideas still tend to remain separate or outside of us, and worst case, in the back recesses of a laptop hard drive or in a shelf somewhere collecting dust in a notebook. And so what I'm realizing is that there is this beautiful opportunity for us to actually bring the creative energy in, to become part of who we are, to not so much become a box, because we can do that, but that also sets up this kind of like boundary or limitation or wall on the creativity, and also can put pressure on us to be like, well, now I am a painter, and so that's what I'm going to do all of the time. And if I have moments of not being inspired, therefore I'm failing and I'm not an artist. Like, our mind will play all of these types of old stories and old conditionings and random things from society, random things from movies. It will try and tell you these stories to keep yourself safe. But what I am discovering through this whole process is that this flame, this fire to be creative, to be expressive, it is not a temporary coat that I want to wear. It is not a a nice to have that I want to have. It is actually core to me as a being, as someone who is made up of source energy, of vibration, of frequency. It is part of me. It is something that moves through me. It is essential to me. And I want to start to give myself permission, and I am doing that now, is I give myself permission to allow this creative energy to be me, to allow myself to bring it into my everyday. And I've been doing a lot of contemplation over the last few weeks to understand, where does this creative energy start for me? Like, what does this look like? Is it the traditional forms that I was trained in when I was young of oil painting and collage and a few other things? And it's not. They were just these beautiful activities that I did at the time to start tapping into this. But this desire that I have now, it's coming from a different place. And I'm feeling photography call me. I'm feeling writing. I just caught up with my mom yesterday, and she, bless her soul, had kept my grandmother's original typewriters. And so she's just given them to me with some fresh typewriter ribbons. And there's this part of me that just wants to get onto the typewriter, this real tactile feeling of typing on the keys to allow channel poetry to come through. And I really want to be behind the camera, and I want to capture women and architecture and really interesting creative things. And what's been really interesting, because I have been someone who has had I was talking about it before, such a restrictive, resistive relationship with Instagram. And I've been trying to figure out what is the best way to be on Instagram with millions of followers and, a key influencer and blah, blah, blah. It's like I'm dropping and stripping all of that back to be like, how do I take this creative energy that's all around me and that is part of me and flowing through me, this sacral fire? How do I take that with this desire that's coming seemingly out of nowhere, but of course everything is divinely guided and it's perfectly timed. And so this yearning now to pick up the camera, how do I combine that with the typewriter, with the writing, with the messages that want to come through me into this creative practice that I can then share on social media? And so you should have seen me over the weekend. This has been rattling around my brains, this question, for what feels like weeks now. And so over the weekend, I got the Post-it notes and a texter and cleared the kitchen table, and I just started writing down everything that came into my mind, either a belief or a challenge or you can't do that or a creative idea. What it is that I want to do with this creative energy that's flowing through me, particularly when it comes to no longer hiding and showing up on social media, showing up in the world. What does that look like? And so I spent the weekend just getting all of the resistance, all of the fear, all the ideas out of my head onto random Post-it notes. Like there was stuff going on everywhere and we couldn't eat off the table for days. But then slowly and surely, just by connecting into that, like, what is it that's being revealed here? What is it that the universe, source, my team, what is it you want me to see? Where are the patterns? What is the information that exists for me to be able to start making a different decision and move forward? And slowly and surely, I started to see, even though I have a lot of fear and a lot of resistance, and I wanted the surety of, knowing definite actions before I showed up, because I had a lot of fear around, well, what will people think? Do I start a new Instagram account? Do I go with the old one? The algorithm hates the old one at the moment because I absolutely trashed it. What do I do? And I don't have fancy photography yet. At the same time this weekend, I just took a photography course, both the beginner and the advanced stuff, to learn how to use the camera. My brother-in-law just gave me a camera and a bunch of lenses. It was such a sweet gift. Thank you, Scott, if you're listening. And I took this camera and I tried to figure out how to use it and I couldn't. So I went and did this beginner's photography course this weekend, which I'm feeling so much more inspired and starting to really attune to the camera gear and the things that I want to start shooting. But in this process of all these post-it notes, I'm like, well, I can't start a Instagram feed of my photography because I don't have the photos yet. And I felt that contraction start of like, well, if I don't have the photos, then I probably should wait to post. I should probably wait until I've got it right before I take any kind of like action around that, because I don't want to be either seen as, I don't know, seen as an amateur or seen as a loser, or it's interesting, the dialogue that our stories, that our minds want to create, these little mini stories of all these things. And sometimes we don't even know where they come from. But I just got it all down on these post-it notes and sorted it through. And what came up was really interesting. And this is something that I've never considered before. I never thought was part of my wheelhouse, my desire, something that I would ever be able to do. But there's this really strong current of, I want to show up on Instagram with an art feed, a beautiful feed. And I'm not talking about beautiful curated lifestyle feed, but just I want to write, and I want to even use AI and all of these different creative skills that are starting to come in to my abilities, because I'm finally opening the door and allowing them to come in, to create this beautiful Instagram feed that is like an art portfolio. And this is something that I've never considered before, because I thought artists and this kind of stuff was only for the extremely talented, for the extremely creative. Also, every marketing, social media, mentor, expert that I've ever studied under is always like algorithm first, performance first, selling first, all of these types of rules and regulations around what is appropriate, that I'd never considered something that was just to be beautiful, or just to put something out in the world that was creative and that was for me and for my expression. It never occurred to me. And what I'm realizing is that right now in this phase that I'm in, and you might be feeling this within yourself as well, it's like there needs to be a change for you to do something purely for you, purely for the beauty of it, for the expression of it. And that is perfectly okay. Beyond that, that is perfectly powerful. It is something that we need to follow, because the more that we follow these beautiful little soul nudges, whether it's creative in a way that's outside the norm, it is so important, because what it's doing is it is telling ourselves, firstly, that it is okay to think outside the box, that it is okay to access parts of ourselves that we had labeled and popped in other little pockets or components that we told ourselves the world didn't want, or wasn't safe, or wasn't needed, or wasn't popular, all the different labels that we have put on them. It starts to allow ourselves to dismantle those old constructs and reclaim some of those parts of ourselves, reclaim some of that energy that's been so tied up in keeping things in separate little pockets and separate little buckets and away from ourselves to keep ourselves safe. It's like we're reclaiming that energy back. All of a sudden, we're telling ourselves, hey, it's okay to be whole. It's okay for you to look at those parts of yourself that you buried such a long time ago. And that can be such an overwhelming feeling, to finally meet yourself in a place where you can look yourself in the eye and say, you're enough and you're whole, and I'm going to reclaim all the lost parts of you that you abandoned so long ago to become whole and to become who you are. And it could be having a gallery exhibition, it could be doing something and taking it to a market, or podcasting, whatever it is that you want to take that and reclaim that energy and that creative part of you, make something unique, make something magical, and put it out in the world as a signal to your nervous system, to your soul, to your energy, that you are whole and that it's safe to start reclaiming this stuff. That is so, so important. And so that's why, coming back to this idea of inspired action, It's like we want to give ourselves permission to take this action and to make moves, particularly with creative energy, way before we even think we're ready, way before we think that the world is going to want it. We need to start moving because it signals to ourselves that we've got ourselves, that we've got our own back, and that we can do this. Because even although we can go and work with healers and modalities and look outside of ourselves to fix this stuff, and of course, so many of those healings and modalities and therapies are incredible. But at the end of the day, the action needs to come from ourselves. It has to come from within to the outside world. It can't come from the outside world to try and shove or pull the energy in to then make ourselves feel whole. It's like we need to find this passion, this energy that exists within us, even if it is like the tiniest little atom, one tiny little atom down in the bottom of your ankle. That's the only piece of safety or trust or energy or creativity that you can find. It's like find that little dot of energy and then magnify it and allow that to be the spark that moves through us, that collects up these beautiful kaleidoscopic pieces that we've left elsewhere, and just call them back home and be like, no, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to do this because this is the action that I need to take to tell my nervous system that I'm safe, to break myself out of these constructs or these feelings that I've held around me to keep safe. Even although I'm miserable, they're keeping me safe. I want to get out of those. And we start to move in that in creative energy. And so I'm taking these photography classes. I'm going actually straight after this podcast episode to meet a photographer here in Melbourne whose work closely mirrors the types of things that I'm really drawn to. And I wrote to her and just said, look, I'm, in this phase of trying to rediscover who I am, and I'm feeling called to photography and your work. I find your work so inspiring. Would you be interested in me shadowing you and you mentoring me if you've got any shoots coming up? And she wrote back to me and said, yes, absolutely. Come and meet me for lunch and we'll figure out what shoots you can come on. Even just sending that email originally, there was a part of me that was like, she's not going to respond. She's not going to have time to mentor some beginner. I had a whole bunch of stories and I almost didn't send the email. But I'm so glad that I did. I just found that tiny little spark in me that was like, no, there's something here. There's a reason why this is coming to me. Send the email. And she wrote back, and I'm leaving in about 15 minutes to go in and have lunch with her. And these are the things that can completely change our lives. I don't know what's going to be on the other side of starting this Instagram feed. And right now, as it stands, I don't even have a clear vision on what that's going to look like. I'm starting to get little glimpses of that and some things that I'm seeing, on Pinterest and other feeds that I'm like, oh, I love that idea. And, I'm going to reboot an old Instagram account. If you want to follow me on this journey, it's going to be my original account that I started years ago. It's Path, P-A-T-H and 9, P-A-T-H-A-N-D-N-I-N-E, Path and 9 on Instagram. I'm going to just turn this into the art feed. And my other handle that I use on Instagram, Andy.Matthews, I'm going to change that too. I'm going to make it less about having to show up and be in a certain way or, show in a certain way and try and please the algorithm. I'm going to think about what that feed is going to look like in terms of showing the behind the scenes of this art feed, this new energy that I'm stepping into. And I haven't quite figured that one out yet. That one might take me a little bit more time. And there's probably a little bit more mopping up energetically that I need to do around letting myself just be seen as is versus trying to always polish something. And I'll need to think about how to reboot the algorithm's view of that account because I really have cooked it. But right now, Path and 9, this new account, I'm just going to allow this artistic energy to flow through me and show up in that space, see where this photography goes, keep taking classes, dust off these typewriters that I just got yesterday and start writing. I really want to just channel through poetry that are typed on these typewriters, get, if anyone's listening and they want a little channeled poem, we can get you to send me a photograph of yourself or a memory or something from the past, and I'll connect with that energy and just create these beautiful poetry pieces. These are the kinds of things that the previous version of me, the corporate, the entrepreneur version of me would have been like, that's crazy. No one wants that. Can't monetize that. Where's the growth strategy? Where's the blah-de-blah-de-blah, construct around that to, write off these kinds of ideas. But this phase has just taught me that we need to start listening to our energy, to our deeper selves, and we need to allow what that reveals, what that voice is telling us, we need to allow that in. We need to allow ourselves to start finding safety in these new constructs, because these are reflections and glimpses of our soul essence, of who we truly are when we strip back all of the labels, all of the roles, all of the expectations that society puts on us, the things that we're so used to doing. It allows us to kind of get underneath all of that and see what's really here and see what's really important. And I'm realizing that I want to leave behind the correct, proper entrepreneur and even, successful expert coach / mentor titles and boxes aside, and step into this new energy, identity, but bigger than that, this new phase of allowing artistry to flow through me. What does it look like to be an artist, to be a creative, to actually set up my life and my work and why I'm here from a creative, connected, artistic energy flow perspective? What does that look like? Because I've never given myself permission to do that before, but I'm feeling and hearing so loud and clear that that is something that we need to do. We need to listen to that, to allow that to come in. Because if we look at, even if we still need to find safety around strategy and success and entrepreneurship and corporate, if we look at some of the most incredible inventions, products, and companies that exist, they came from the creative spark, from someone who was willing to be brave enough to listen to a creative idea that they had, something that floated past them on the ether for them to be brave enough to grab hold of and allow creative expression to come through them. That is how some of the most incredible things that we have, that we love, that we cherish, that have become engineering, technology, have become into that strategic energy and masculine energy eventually. But they started with the willingness to dream, to be creative, and to then take inspired action in a brand new direction. And even although I'm nervous, and when I sat down to even record this episode, I was like, what am I even going to talk about today? Like, I don't have anything specific. I don't have a particular plan, lesson, message to share today, but allowing myself to be in the inspired action of, I'm just going to talk about what is here for me right now, which is this exploration of creativity and this battle that I had on the weekend of trying to figure out Instagram and all of this type of stuff. Just taking inspired action and trusting yourself enough to put pen to paper, to pick up that tool, that camera, that microphone, to just take the inspired action to record the episode, to just share what is coming through you is so powerful. And each time you do it, it creates these incredible ripple effects that just change your life, that you just will never regret for the rest of your life. And even if you can't see, just taking that first inspired action and the next little inspired action, finding that tiny little atom, that spark of creativity, or that massive fire that exists that you're ignoring, just taking that and following that wherever it will go is going to be incredible, because not being able to see it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist or doesn't mean that it's not going to blow your mind or take you somewhere that's going to be incredible down the track. Just have faith, trust, take that inspired action, even if you're afraid, even if you don't want to, even if your mind wants to tell you something like it's not going to work out or it's scary. Just come back to that fuel, to that fire, to the reason why you're here, the fact that you're made of frequency and energy and source, and just take that inspired action today, because this journey is wild. It is incredible. It is powerful. And the more we do it, the more we follow it, the more our lives are going to be so much more fulfilling and so much more adventurous, because we just continue to trust and we continue to move because we're worth it. I love you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you want to check out all of the behind the scenes content for this podcast, make sure you subscribe to my Substack channel, The Becoming Archive. You'll also be able to find me on Threads and Instagram at andy.matthews. Make sure you're connected and stay up to date with what's coming. If you're not in there yet and you want to get into the private Telegram space where all of these audios drop every day, as well as all the art, the conversation, and the behind the scenes, go to www.andrealeematthews.com/private podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at Andrea Lee Matthews, and you can find more about me and all of my work at andrealeematthews.com. I'll see you in the next transmission.